Simplifying Biomechanics.
Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Simplifying Biomechanics. So in today's video, we will try to understand and learn about the human skeletal system. So before we jump into learning about human skeleton system, let us first understand what is human skeleton. So what is skeleton? So skeleton provides obviously the framework of the human body. It provides the shape and the support and provides the load-bearing structure to the human body, right? So human skeletal system consists of bones, and when two bones come in close proximity to each other, they form a joint, right? So we have bones and the joints in the human skeletal system. So in this particular lecture, we will not be focusing on the joints in the human skeletal system. Rather, we will be particularly focusing on different types of bones in the human skeletal system. So if somebody is interested in knowing or learning about the types of joint in the human skeleton system, so they can refer to my previous video, whose link is provided in the description box. So let us jump into the human skeletal system. Right. So human skeletal system is generally broadly classified into two broad categories. The first is known as the axial skeleton, and the other one is known as the appendicular skeleton. So let us understand what is axial and appendicular skeleton. Right. So what is axial? Axial means something which is central to the system. Right. So the part of the human skeletal system which is central to the human skeletal system forms the axial skeleton, right? And anything which is apart from the axial skeleton system is basically constitute the appendicular skeletal system. So what do you mean by appendicular? Appendicular means appendages, right? Appendages means attachment, right? So anything which is attached to the axial skeleton forms the appendicular skeleton, right? So in this particular lecture, we will be focusing on these two different types of skeletal system, axial and appendicular skeleton. We will be looking at different bones which are present in axial and appendicular skeleton. In axial skeleton, you have four different parts of your human skeleton system. So you have something called a skull, then you have hyoid bone, then you have vertebral column and thoracic cage. So all these four different parts are a part of axial skeleton, right? So in total, you have 80 bones in the axial skeleton. Then you have other four parts of the human skeletal system that forms a part of appendicular skeleton. And these are pectoral girdle, upper limbs, pelvic girdle and lower limbs. And if you count the number of bones in the appendicular skeleton, then they are 126 in numbers. So if you add 80 and 126, then 206 bones in total is a part of human skeletal system. So we will try to see different bones of the axial and appendicular skeleton in details. So let us start with the axial skeleton. So axial skeleton, you have the skull, right, which is a part of axial skeleton, right? So it consists of 22 bones. Then you have a hyoid bone, which is a single bone. So this is a hyoid bone which is present at your neck. So this bone is not attached to any bones of the skeletal system, right? So this bone is only the floating bone in the human skeletal system, and this bone helps in swallowing of the food. So when you swallow your food, this bone basically move up and down, right? So this is a single bone which is known as hyoid bone. Then you have vertebral column. So everybody is familiar with the vertebral column. So it consists of 26 bones. We will try to see vertebral column in details, right? So this is a central, bones that forms the vertebral column. Then you have the thoracic cage. So the thoracic region of the vertebral column is basically consists of the thoracic ribs, which are attached posteriorly to the thoracic vertebral columns and anteriorly to the bone which is called as sternum, which is right here, right? So these ribs, right? These ribs anteriorly connected to the sternum and posteriorly connected to the thoracic vertebra of the vertebral column. So this forms a cage. The sternum and the ribs forms a cage which is known as thoracic cage. So thoracic cage, vertebral column, thyroid bone and skull forms the part of axial skeleton. And whatever is attached to this axial skeleton forms a part of appendicular skeleton. For example, pectoral girdle. So what is pectoral girdle? So pectoral girdle formed by, two bones. The first bone is the clavicle bone, which is right here. the straight bone, and then you have the scapula, which is a triangular bone. If you look from behind, then you will see a triangular bone. So the clavicle and this scapula, form together the pectoral girdle, and pectoral girdle provides the attachment to the upper limb, right? So this upper limb is a part of, again, the appendicular skeleton. So the pelvic girdle, which is formed by clavicle and the scapula and the upper limb, right? This is a part of appendicular skeleton. And in the lower part of your body, you have the lower limb, right? So this is the lower limb. And this lower limb is attached to the axial skeleton through something called as pelvic girdle. So in the pelvic girdle, we will see different bones in the pelvic girdle, but just remember, this is a part of the appendicular skeleton, which is a pelvic girdle. And this provides the attachment to the lower limb. So this is the complete arrangement of the human skeletal system, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Right now we will see one by one different parts of the skeletal system and the bones they basically consist of. Now let us discuss the different bones in the skull. So different bones in the skull can be visualized by dividing the skull into two different parts, that is cranial part and the facial part of the skull. So the cranial region, which is a top part of the skull, consists of in total 8 bones, and the facial part of the skull, that is the front part of the skull, consists of in total 14 bones, right? So the cranial region of the brain, let us discuss the bones in the cranial region of the brains. So you have something called as frontal bone, which is at the front of your cranial part. Then you have the parietal bone. So parietal bone are 2 in number, left and the right parietal. Then you have the occipital bone, which is again 1 in number. The frontal bone is also 1 in number. Then you have the temporal bone, which is the bone near to your ear, right? So they are also 2 in number, left and right temporal bone. Then apart from these 5 bones, you have another, apart from these 6 bones, you have another 2 bones, which are known as sphenoid and ethmoid bone. So sphenoid bone and the ethmoid bone both forms the part of the nasal cavity and the eye orbit, right? So they are present in the cranial region of the skull. Now coming to the facial bone. So facial bone are 14 in number. So you have mandible, which is the part of your jawbone, and then you have maxilla, which is again a part of your jawbone, which is present on the upper part of your jaw, which are 2 in number, left and right maxilla. And then you have something called as nasal bones, which forms the upper part of the nasal septum. Then you have nasal conchia, which is the lower part of your nasal septums, right? And then you have lacrimal bone, which is the part of your eye socket, which is near to your lacrimal gland, right? And then you have palatine bone, which is the bone present at your palate. And then lastly, you have the zygomatic bone, which is the bone at the left and the right part of your cheek. So these are the cheek bones, right? So what are these bones? So let us write these bones here. So you have maxilla, you have mandible, then you have zygomatic bone, you have nasal bone, right? Then you have nasal conchae, right? And after that, what you have is known as palatine bone, and then you have something called as the vomer bone, which is the bottom part of your nasal septum, right? So I think these are the pretty much bones in the facial part of your skull, right? As far as I remember, right? So these are the different bones in your skull. Let us now come to the vertebral column. So vertebral column, as I told you, there are 26 bones. So in the vertebral column, this is shown here. So the first 7 bones in the vertebral column are the cervical vertebrae. So they are 7 in numbers, C1 to C7, right? Then you have the thoracic vertebrae. So they are 12 in number, T1 to T12. Then you have lumbar vertebrae. Those are 5 in numbers, which is around the lumbar region of your vertebral column, L1 to L5. Then you have the sacrum. So sacrum is a single bone, and this single bone is formed as a result of fusion of 5 bones, right? So the 5 bones fused to form a single sacrum bone, and again you have the bones known as coccyx, which is also a fusion of 3 to 5 different bones, right? So if you count these different bones, then they are 26 in numbers, right? Now coming to the thoracic cage. So I told you thoracic cage consists of the central sternum, so which is one bone, and then you have 12 pair of thoracic ribs. So 12 pair of thoracic ribs means 24 bones plus one sternum. So they are basically 25 bones. So in total, axial skeleton consists of 80 bones. Coming to the appendicular skeleton. So appendicular skeleton consists of pectoral girdle, upper limb, pelvic girdle, and lower limbs, right? So pectoral girdle, as I told you, it consists of clavicle and scapula. So clavicle and scapula on the left and clavicle and scapula on the right, right? So how many bones? 2 on the left and 2 on the right, right? So in total, 4 bones in the pectoral girdle. Then in the upper limb, we have 60 bones. So let us understand how these 60 bones are present in the upper limb, right? So this is the upper limb. So the forearm of the upper limb is called as humerus, and which is a single bone, right? So this is a humerus bone, which is a single bone. Then you have in the forearm the radius and the ulna, right? You have radius and ulna, which are 2 bones, and then you have the bones in your hand. So I have enlarged this hand and shown it here. So in the hand, what you have the carpals, you have the metacarpals, and you have the phalanges, right? So carpals forms the wrist joint, right? So how many carpal bones are there? So these are very small bones in the carpal or the wrist region of your hand. So these are 16 in numbers. Then you have something called as metacarpals. These are 10 in numbers, right? So I'm counting like both left and right metacarpals here. So if you talk about a single metacarpals of a single hand, then it will be 5 in number. Again, this will be 8 in number of a single hand. Then you have the phalanges, which are 14 in number for a single hand. So if you like multiply these numbers by 2 and add together, then all these numbers will add up to 60. So how many bones do you have in the upper limb? You have 60 bones in the upper limb. Coming to the other part of the appendicular skeleton, which is pelvic girdle. So pelvic girdle is shown here. Now let us discuss this pelvic girdle in details. So this whole pelvic girdle consists of 2 bones joined together, right? So you have the left pelvic bone and the right pelvic bone. So these 2 bones joined together, right? So the left pelvic bone consists of iliac, which is an upper part of this pelvic bone, right? One section of the pelvic bone. Then you have ischium, which is shown here, which is the lower and the posterior part of the pelvic bone. And then you have something called as pubis, which is the anterior part of the pelvic bone. So this bone over here will be, coming outwards. So this is the anterior part of your pelvic bone. So you have 3 different bones on each side. So in total, how many bones do you have? You have 6 bones in total, right? So, but these bones together considered as one. So you have one pelvic bone in the left and one pelvic bone in the right. So you have effectively 2 bones in the pelvic girdle. So what is the purpose of this pelvic girdle? This pelvic girdle provides the attachment point, which is known as acetabulum, which is a socket to the lower limb, right? So this is covered here. Now coming to the lower limb. So lower limb have 60 bones. So let us see how this lower limb has 60 bones. So again, the upper part of the lower limb is known as femur, right? So which is one bone, right, on a single side. Then you have the lower part of your lower limb. The lower part consists of 2 bones. What are these 2 bones? These bones are tibia and fibula. So this is tibia and this is fibula. This is tibia bone and this is fibula bone. Then you have the foot. So as we have seen in the hand, we have many bones. We similarly have many bones on the foot, right? So at the ankle region, you have a set of bones known as tarsals. Similarly, we have the carpals in the hand. So how many tarsals are there on a single foot? So this is a figure of a single foot. So you have the tarsal set of muscles here, right? So these are, again, I have made a mistake here. So this is the tarsal set of muscles, and this is metatarsals. This is metatarsals. So tarsal set of muscles is 14 in number. So on a single foot, it is 7 in number. Then you have metatarsals, they are 5 in numbers, and phalanges, which is a part of your fingers, so they are 14 in number. So if you make these numbers multiply by 2 and then add together, then you will get 60 total bones in the lower part of your limb. So if you add all these numbers, then total number will be 206 bones. So in this lecture, what we have covered is, we have covered different bones in the human skeletal system, right? So we have defined what is axial and appendicular skeleton, different parts of the axial and appendicular skeleton, and different bones in the axial and appendicular skeleton. So if you have enjoyed this video, liked this video, then please don't forget to like this video, subscribe this video.